Most people pass bulletin boards without really looking at them. They are usually filled with the ordinary fragments of everyday life. Advertisements for yard sales, lost pet notices, local church events, and handwritten reminders about community meetings. In a small American town, those boards act like quiet storytellers, collecting the small concerns of the people who live nearby. On an otherwise ordinary afternoon, a man named Nathan Cole walked past one of those boards outside a neighborhood grocery store. Nathan was the kind of man who rarely stopped for things like that. At 45 years old, he had spent most of his life focusing on practical responsibilities, working long hours as an electrician, raising a family, and following the steady routines that make up the rhythm of daily life. But something on that board caught his attention just long enough to slow his steps. Among the familiar flyers and faded notices was a piece of paper that looked different from the others. It was a missing person poster, printed in bold black letters across the top. At first, Nathan only noticed it because the photograph seemed strangely familiar, the kind of familiarity that makes you look twice without immediately understanding why. Then he stepped closer and realized something that stopped him completely. The man in the photograph was him. For a moment, Nathan simply stared at the poster, convinced that his eyes must be playing some kind of trick on him. The photograph showed his face clearly, the same short brown hair, the same tired expression he often saw in the mirror after a long day of work, even the same small scar above his eyebrow that he had carried since childhood. The description beneath the photograph listed details that matched him perfectly: height, weight, occupation, town of residence. Every line seemed to confirm what he was already seeing. The poster described a man named Nathan Cole who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But there was one detail that made the situation impossible to understand. According to the date printed on that poster, Nathan Cole had not disappeared yet. In fact, the document claimed that his disappearance would happen 10 years in the future. Most people never expect to see their own face on a missing person poster. But imagine discovering one that describes an event that has not happened yet, an event that suggests your life may already have an ending written somewhere you cannot see. Nathan pulled the poster from the board and read it again carefully, hoping the strange detail might somehow disappear if he looked at it long enough. The paper felt ordinary in his hands, the kind of cheap printing material anyone could produce with a basic computer and printer. Yet the information printed across it seemed far too specific to be random. The date of the supposed disappearance was written clearly at the bottom of the page. October 14th, 10 years from that exact day. For a man who had spent his entire life believing in logic and straightforward explanations, the situation felt deeply unsettling. Nathan had never believed in strange predictions or mysterious warnings. He was a practical person who fixed electrical systems for a living, someone who trusted tools, measurements, and things that could be proven. And yet here he was holding a document that appeared to describe a future event involving his own life. Before we continue and uncover how this discovery began changing everything for Nathan Cole, take a moment to join the conversation with people watching this story from around the world. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what Nathan Cole would discover in the days after finding that poster would challenge every assumption he had about coincidence, identity, and the possibility that some events may be written long before they happen. The town where Nathan Cole lived was the kind of place people often describe as quiet in the best possible way. Tucked into a peaceful corner of Oregon, it was a community where most streets stayed calm after sunset, and where neighbors recognized each other at the grocery store, the post office, and the small diners scattered along the main road. Crime was rare enough that it rarely appeared in local conversation, and life moved with the kind of steady rhythm that makes each day feel comfortably familiar. People built their routines around predictable schedules: work in the morning, errands in the afternoon, and evenings spent with family or friends. It was the kind of town where very little ever seemed to happen that could truly shock anyone. For someone like Nathan Cole, that stability had always been part of the appeal. At 45 years old, Nathan Cole had spent most of his adult life building what many people would consider an ordinary but respectable existence. He worked as a licensed electrician, a job that required long hours but rewarded patience and attention to detail. Nathan was the type of person who preferred solving practical problems rather than chasing excitement. If something broke, he fixed it. If something needed wiring, he installed it correctly the first time. The same mindset guided the rest of his life. He had been married for nearly 2 decades, and together he and his wife had raised a daughter who was quickly approaching her teenage years. Their home sat on a quiet residential street lined with modest houses and well-kept lawns, the kind of place where weekends often meant barbecues, errands, and small conversations with neighbors who had lived nearby for years. Nothing about Nathan's life suggested mystery or drama. His routine was steady and predictable, and he had always believed that consistency was one of the best signs that a person was doing something right. That is why the moment he discovered the missing person poster felt so deeply unsettling. It was not simply the strange coincidence of seeing his own photograph on a flyer that made the situation difficult to understand. It was the realization that the information printed beneath the photograph seemed to describe a future that had not happened yet. The poster claimed that Nathan Cole would disappear on a specific day 10 years in the future. For a man who had always trusted practical explanations, the idea sounded almost impossible. Yet the more he examined the details, the harder it became to dismiss the situation as a harmless joke. Every line of information on the page was accurate. His profession, his height, the town where he lived. Even the small identifying scar above his eyebrow was mentioned in the description. It was as if whoever created the poster knew him personally. That discovery left Nathan Cole with questions that grew more troubling the longer he considered them. Why would someone create a missing person poster for an event that had not happened yet? Who had enough information about his life to produce something so detailed? And perhaps most unsettling of all, why did the document include a precise date for the day he was supposed to vanish? These were not the kinds of questions Nathan had ever expected to ask about his own life. But as he continued reading the poster, he noticed something else that made the situation even more disturbing. The document did not simply display his face and a vague description. It included a clear prediction about when he would disappear. Because the poster did not just show Nathan Cole's photograph, it described the exact day he would vanish. To understand why the discovery of that poster unsettled Nathan Cole so deeply, it helps to understand the kind of person he had always been before that moment. Nathan was widely known throughout the small Oregon town as someone reliable and practical. As an electrician, his work required precision, patience, and a steady mind, qualities that had shaped the way he approached every part of his life. When people in town needed help repairing faulty wiring or installing a new system in their homes, Nathan was often the first person they called. He had built his reputation not through flashy achievements, but through quiet consistency. If Nathan Cole promised he would show up, he showed up. If something needed to be fixed, he found a way to fix it. Over the years, that reliability had earned him the trust of neighbors, co-workers, and friends who appreciated the calm confidence he brought to problems that might frustrate someone else. Nathan's personality leaned strongly toward logic and skepticism. He was the kind of person who preferred clear explanations over speculation. Stories about strange predictions, unexplained events, or mysterious warnings were things he usually dismissed with a quiet smile. In his view, most situations could be understood if you gathered enough information and examined the facts carefully. That attitude had guided him through decades of work and family life, and it had rarely failed him. If someone had told Nathan Cole that he would one day question the nature of something as fundamental as time itself, he probably would have laughed and returned to whatever job he was working on. Yet that was exactly the position he now found himself in, holding a missing person poster that seemed to describe a future version of his own life. Nathan's home life had always been another source of stability. His wife, Laura Cole, had spent nearly 20 years building a life with him, and the two had developed the kind of partnership that grows stronger through shared routines and responsibilities. Laura was known for her patience and calm presence, qualities that balanced Nathan's tendency to focus intensely on work. When the days became stressful, she was often the one who reminded him to step back and spend time with the family they had built together. Recently, however, Laura had begun noticing something unusual about her husband's behavior. Nathan seemed distracted more often than usual, occasionally pausing in the middle of conversations as if trying to remember something important he could not quite identify. At first, she assumed the change was related to work pressure or fatigue, but after the discovery of the poster, she began to wonder if something else had been affecting him long before that day. Their daughter, Emily Cole, had also begun observing small changes in her father's behavior. At 14 years old, Emily had developed a curious and observant personality that often led her to notice details other people overlooked. She was the kind of teenager who asked thoughtful questions and paid attention to the subtle shifts in people's moods. In the weeks before the poster appeared, Emily had noticed that her father occasionally seemed uneasy for reasons he could not explain. Sometimes he would glance toward the street outside their house, as if expecting to see someone standing there. Other times he would check his phone after hearing it vibrate, only to discover there had been no message. When Emily asked about those moments, Nathan usually brushed them aside with a simple explanation, saying he was probably just tired from work. But the pattern had begun appearing often enough that Emily quietly remembered it. Within the community, Nathan Cole's reputation remained unchanged. Neighbors described him as dependable and generous, someone who helped organize local events and offered his skills freely when someone needed assistance. If a friend's house experienced an electrical problem, Nathan often arrived with his tools before anyone even asked. That quiet generosity had made him a respected figure in the neighborhood. People trusted him not only because of his skill, but because of the calm honesty that seemed to guide everything he did. Nothing about his reputation suggested he was someone connected to mystery or controversy. Yet as Nathan thought more about the poster he had removed from the grocery store bulletin board, he began remembering small moments from recent months that suddenly seemed different. There had been times when strangers appeared to watch him longer than necessary while he worked on a job. There had been phone calls from unknown numbers that disconnected the moment he answered. At the time, he had dismissed those events as harmless coincidences, the kind of minor inconveniences that happen to everyone occasionally. But after finding the poster predicting his disappearance 10 years in the future, those memories felt far more unsettling. Because when Nathan Cole looked closer at the document in his hands, he noticed something even more disturbing. Nathan Cole stood in front of the bulletin board for several seconds longer than he intended, trying to convince himself that what he was seeing had a simple explanation. Finally, he reached up, carefully removed the poster, and folded it just enough to carry it with him. The paper felt ordinary, thin and slightly rough like the type used in inexpensive printers, yet the information printed on it seemed far too precise to ignore. Nathan stepped away from the board and began examining the details more closely. Beneath the photograph were several lines describing the missing individual. Height, weight, occupation, and town of residence were all listed clearly. Each piece of information matched Nathan perfectly. The description even mentioned small details that most strangers would never know, including the faint scar above his eyebrow and the fact that he worked as an electrician. Whoever created the poster clearly knew him well enough to describe him accurately. But the part that made Nathan pause was not the photograph or the description. It was the line printed near the bottom of the page that described the date of the disappearance. The words were simple but impossible to ignore. According to the poster, Nathan Cole would vanish on October 14th. At first, that detail did not seem unusual. Missing person notices often include the last known date someone was seen. But when Nathan read the line again, he realized something that made his stomach tighten. The date printed on the flyer was not a date from the past. It was 10 years in the future. Nathan looked at the numbers again, expecting to find some kind of printing error, but the text remained the same. October 14th, 10 years from the current year. For several seconds, he stood there silently, trying to determine whether someone had created an elaborate prank. Perhaps a coworker or friend had decided to play a strange joke, something designed to confuse him for a moment before revealing the trick. That explanation seemed reasonable enough, at least at first. But the longer Nathan examined the poster, the more difficult it became to dismiss the situation so easily. Another detail caught his attention near the bottom of the page. Beneath the description was a phone number listed as the contact for information about the disappearance. Nathan hesitated briefly before pulling his phone from his pocket and dialing the number. The call connected for a moment before a mechanical voice responded with a message stating that the number was not in service. That alone would not have been unusual, but Nathan decided to look more closely at the digits he had just dialed. The area code printed at the beginning of the number did not look familiar. Curious, he searched for it online. What he discovered only deepened the mystery. According to every source he checked, that area code had not yet been assigned to any region in the country. In fact, Records suggested it was scheduled to be introduced years in the future as telecommunications systems expanded. The realization made Nathan feel even more unsettled. Whoever created the poster had printed a phone number that technically did not exist yet. At that point, Nathan decided he needed more information. After returning home, he began searching online for anything related to missing person reports, unusual flyers, or similar incidents in nearby towns. Hours passed as he examined articles, community forums, and public records databases. Nothing appeared that resembled the document he had found. There were no mentions of someone predicting a disappearance before it happened, and certainly no reports involving a poster dated a decade into the future. Eventually, Nathan remembered that the grocery store where he discovered the flyer had several security cameras installed around the entrance and parking lot. If someone had posted the notice recently, the cameras might have recorded the moment it appeared on the board. The next morning, Nathan visited the store again and explained the situation to the manager, who reluctantly allowed him to review the footage from the previous night. The recording showed the quiet parking lot long after the store had closed. For several minutes, nothing happened except the occasional movement of wind pushing debris across the pavement. Then, sometime after midnight, a figure entered the frame and approached the bulletin board. The person moved quickly, placing a sheet of paper among the other notices before stepping away and disappearing into the darkness beyond the camera's range. Unfortunately, the angle of the camera and the poor lighting made it impossible to see the individual's face clearly. Nathan leaned closer to the screen, trying to identify any detail that might reveal the person's identity. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but as he replayed the footage and zoomed in on the person's movements, he noticed something that made his chest tighten. The stranger's face remained hidden, yet the way he walked looked unmistakably familiar. Because when Nathan Cole examined the recording more closely, he realized the man posting the flyer moved exactly the way he did. After reviewing the security footage several times, Nathan Cole decided the situation had moved beyond something he could simply ignore. The combination of the mysterious poster, the strange phone number that technically did not exist yet, and the unsettling similarity between his own walk and the movement of the figure on camera created a pattern he could not easily dismiss. The following morning, Nathan visited the local police station and explained everything to an officer at the front desk. At first, the conversation felt awkward even to Nathan himself. Describing a missing person poster dated 10 years into the future sounded strange when spoken out loud, and he could see the skepticism in the officer's expression as he tried to explain the details. The police agreed to look at the poster and the security footage he had brought with him, but their reaction remained cautious and practical. To them, the situation appeared to be a prank or a harmless attempt by someone to confuse him. Small towns sometimes produced unusual jokes, and the officers suggested that someone who knew Nathan might be responsible for the flyer.
Despite their polite interest, the police eventually concluded there was no immediate evidence of a crime. They advised Nathan to ignore the poster and return if anything more serious happened. The explanation was reasonable enough from their perspective, but it did little to calm the growing sense of unease that Nathan carried with him when he left the station. Something about the entire situation felt too deliberate to be a simple joke. Whoever created the poster had known far too much about his personal life, and the date printed on the flyer continued to linger in his thoughts every time he looked at the paper folded inside his jacket pocket. For the rest of that day, Nathan tried to return to his normal routine, focusing on electrical repairs scheduled for several homes in town. But the strange discovery made it difficult to concentrate. Every small noise or unexpected interruption seemed more significant than it should have been. Then, a few days after reporting the poster to the police, something else began happening that made the situation even more disturbing. Nathan started receiving anonymous messages on his phone. The first message arrived late in the evening while he was sitting in the living room reviewing paperwork from work. The notification appeared from an unknown number and contained only a short sentence. "Don't ignore the date." Nathan stared at the words for several seconds, uncertain whether they were connected to the poster or simply a coincidence. When he tried calling the number, the call disconnected immediately. The following night, another message appeared, again from an unfamiliar number. This time the message read, "You still have time." A third message arrived 2 days later with a line that unsettled him even more. "The poster is a warning." Each message contained only a few words, Yet together they suggested someone was deliberately trying to communicate with him. The repeated messages gradually changed Nathan's behavior. Instead of dismissing the situation, he began approaching it the way he might approach a complicated electrical problem. If something unusual was happening, there had to be a pattern behind it. Nathan started documenting every detail he could remember. He created notes describing the exact time each message arrived and recorded the phone numbers they came from. He built timeline charts showing the moment he discovered the poster, the time he visited the police station, and every strange event that followed. Whenever he noticed something unusual, he wrote it down. The process gave him a sense of control, but it also deepened the mystery as more details accumulated without clear explanations. As the days passed, Nathan began noticing other events that might be connected to the warnings. A car parked near his house for longer than usual. A stranger lingering near the electrical supply store where he often purchased materials. None of those moments proved anything on their own, yet together they created the feeling that someone was watching him. The tension gradually began affecting Nathan's family life as well. Laura Cole noticed the change in her husband's mood almost immediately. Nathan had always been focused and calm, but now he seemed distracted during conversations and restless during the evening hours when the family usually relaxed together. When Laura asked what was bothering him, Nathan hesitated before explaining the situation with the poster and the strange messages. At first, she believed someone might be harassing him or playing an elaborate prank, but the seriousness of Nathan's concern eventually made her uneasy as well. Their daughter, Emily Cole, who had always been observant, soon noticed the tension in the house. She began asking questions about the notes Nathan kept writing in a notebook and the way he frequently checked his phone for new messages. Nathan tried to reassure both of them that he was simply trying to understand what was happening, yet the mystery was slowly beginning to affect the normal rhythm of their daily lives. As the weeks passed, Nathan continued investigating every possible clue. One evening, while reviewing the timeline he had created, he noticed a detail he had overlooked earlier. The strange poster might not have been the first sign that something unusual was happening. Months before discovering the flyer, Nathan had received a package in the mail containing a small envelope with no return address. At the time, he had assumed it was misdelivered or unimportant and had placed it in a drawer without examining it carefully. Now, remembering that moment, he felt a sudden urge to check the envelope again. When he retrieved it from the drawer and opened it, he realized the contents might be connected to the entire mystery. Because what Nathan Cole found inside that envelope suggested something he had never considered before. The poster predicting his disappearance was not the beginning of the warnings. It might only have been the latest one. The discovery inside that forgotten envelope unsettled Nathan Cole more than he expected. At first, the contents appeared ordinary, only a printed sheet folded carefully in half. But when Nathan unfolded the paper and began reading, he realized it contained a short article copied from what looked like a news website. The headline described the disappearance of a man from a small Oregon town. That alone might not have seemed unusual, except for one detail that immediately caught Nathan's attention. The photograph accompanying the article showed a man who looked almost identical to him. The same shape of the face, the same short brown hair, even the same small scar above the eyebrow that Nathan had carried since childhood. For several seconds he stared at the image, trying to convince himself it was simply a coincidence involving someone with a similar appearance. But the details written beneath the photograph made that explanation harder to believe. According to the article, the missing man had worked as an electrician in the same town where Nathan lived. The description listed the same age Nathan would be 10 years from now. The physical description matched his own almost perfectly. Even the town mentioned in the report was the same quiet Oregon community Nathan had lived in for years. Yet the name attached to the story was not Nathan Cole. It belonged to someone else entirely, a name Nathan had never heard before. The strange similarity between the two men raised questions Nathan struggled to answer. Was it possible that another electrician living nearby simply resembled him? In a small town where many families had lived for generations, coincidences sometimes occurred. But the deeper Nathan read into the article, the more disturbing the situation became. Because this report was not describing an event that had already happened. When Nathan looked at the date printed at the top of the page, he felt the same uneasy sensation he had experienced while reading the missing person poster. The article was dated 10 years in the future. At first, he thought the document must have been altered or incorrectly printed. Yet every detail of the page looked authentic. The formatting resembled the layout used by local news websites, complete with publication timestamps and small captions beneath the photographs. If the article was a fabrication, someone had invested considerable effort into making it appear genuine. Nathan searched online for the same story, hoping to find proof that it had been taken from an existing report. But no matter how carefully he looked, he could not locate the article anywhere on the internet. The only copy of that story appeared to be the one now lying on his kitchen table. The implications of that discovery forced Nathan to confront an idea he had been trying to avoid since finding the poster. If the article and the flyer were connected, then someone might have been documenting events that had not happened yet. The thought sounded impossible even as it formed in his mind. For years, Nathan had relied on logical explanations to understand the world around him. But the evidence in front of him refused to fit within any explanation he understood. A missing person poster predicting his disappearance. Anonymous messages warning him not to ignore the date. And now a newspaper article describing a future case involving a man who looked exactly like him. Each piece suggested the same unsettling possibility. Someone, somewhere, seemed to know details about events that had not yet occurred. As Nathan studied the article again, he noticed another detail that connected it directly to the flyer he had discovered earlier. The date mentioned in the news report matched the same day printed on the missing person poster. October 14th, 10 years from the present. The realization made Nathan's chest tighten as he considered what it might mean. Whoever created the poster had not simply chosen a random date to frighten him. That date appeared to be connected to a future event someone had already recorded. And if the article was accurate, then Nathan Cole's disappearance was not just a theoretical prediction. It was part of a story that someone believed would eventually become real. As the weeks passed, Nathan Cole continued searching for answers, examining every piece of evidence connected to the strange poster and the mysterious article that seemed to describe a future event. The more he investigated, the clearer one unsettling idea became. Whoever had created the flyer and sent the article was not trying to frighten him for amusement. The messages he received, the document predicting his disappearance, and the strange timeline connecting everything pointed toward a different purpose. Gradually, Nathan began to realize that the poster might never have been meant as a prediction at all. Instead, it appeared to be something else entirely. It was a warning. The anonymous messages he had received suddenly made more sense when viewed from that perspective. Don't ignore the date. You still have time. The poster is a warning. Those sentences sounded less like threats and more like attempts to alert him to something approaching in the future. Nathan could not determine who had sent them or how they might know details about events that had not yet occurred. But the possibility slowly took shape in his mind that someone might have been trying to prevent something from happening to him. The idea felt almost impossible to accept. Yet the pattern suggested that whoever created the poster believed Nathan's disappearance was not inevitable. If it had been unavoidable, there would have been no reason to warn him at all. Despite months of searching for proof, Nathan never discovered the identity of the person responsible for the messages. The phone numbers continued to lead nowhere, and the article he had found inside the envelope never appeared on any real news site. Even the security footage from the grocery store offered no additional clues beyond the shadowy figure posting the flyer in the middle of the night. Eventually, the investigation reached a point where there were no new directions left to explore. The police had already dismissed the situation as an elaborate prank, and without stronger evidence, there was little more Nathan could do to convince them otherwise. Over time, the strange events faded from the center of daily life, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the lingering sense that something important had almost been revealed but never fully understood. Nathan Cole eventually returned to the routine that had always defined his life. He continued working as an electrician, spending long days repairing wiring and installing new systems throughout the town. Laura Cole and their daughter Emily Cole watched carefully as the tension that once filled their home slowly began to ease. The notes and timeline charts Nathan had created remained stored in a drawer, reminders of a mystery that had once consumed his thoughts. To most people around him, the strange episode seemed to fade into the background like a story that had never quite reached a clear conclusion. Yet for Nathan, the memory never completely disappeared. Every year when October approached, He found himself remembering the poster and the article that described the same date. October 14th remained circled in his mind as a moment that might one day reveal the meaning behind everything he had experienced. Whether the warning had truly come from someone in the future or from a person with knowledge he could never identify, Nathan could never be certain. What he did know was that the events had changed the way he thought about time and coincidence. Because somewhere, written on a piece of paper he still kept hidden in a drawer, was a prediction about the day he might vanish. And as each year passed and October 14th drew closer again, Nathan Cole could not help wondering whether his fate had already been written long before he ever saw that poster. Years later, the bulletin board outside that small grocery store still stands exactly where Nathan Cole first noticed the flyer that changed the way he saw his own life. Dozens of ordinary notices continue to appear there every week. Lost pets, community events, garage sales written on pieces of paper that eventually fade in the sun. To most people walking past, the board is nothing more than a collection of local announcements. But for Nathan Cole, it will always represent the moment when an ordinary afternoon turned into something he still cannot fully explain. Because on that board he once found a missing person poster with his own photograph on it. A poster that described a disappearance that had not happened yet and carried a date 10 years in the future. That discovery raised questions that have never completely been answered. Someone created the poster with remarkable accuracy. Someone sent warnings telling Nathan not to ignore the date. And somewhere along the way a strange article appeared describing a missing man who looked exactly like him. Whether those events were the work of an elaborate prank, a coincidence too unusual to easily dismiss, or something far more mysterious is a question that still lingers in Nathan's mind as each year passes. What makes the story even more unsettling is the fact that the date printed on that poster has not arrived yet. October 14th still exists somewhere in the future, waiting quietly as time moves forward. So the question remains. One man discovered a missing person poster featuring his own face, and that poster predicted a disappearance that has not happened yet. Was it simply a strange coincidence created by someone who knew too much about his life? Was it a warning meant to prevent something from happening years later? Or could it point towards something far stranger than anyone expected when Nathan Cole first removed that flyer from the board? What do you think really happened in this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because stories like this often reveal surprising perspectives when people share their own interpretations. And if you enjoy mysterious real-life stories where a single discovery leads to questions no one can easily answer, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next documentary. Because the next story explores something equally unsettling. A man once received a voicemail message from himself that had been recorded 5 years in the future, and what that message revealed would leave investigators searching for explanations long after the call ended.